didn't eat a lot of lasagna as a kid. It's just not something we had in our house. I liked it whenever I had it, but we just didn't make it. I learned how to make lasagna in culinary school and thought, hey, this is pretty cool. So I kind of stored it in my memory banks. And fast forward to me getting married and cooking at home and stuff like that, and come to find out that my wife Jessica never liked lasagna as a kid because she didn't like how saucy they were, how plain it tasted, or anything like that. And I said, hey, let me try mine out on you. So I went ahead and made it, and she loved it. So that's why we made lasagna. All right, so first thing we're gonna do is go over to the stove and cook our pasta. I have a pot of water here boiling, so come on over and we'll get started. So you need to salt your pasta water a little bit before you put your pasta in, because that's the only chance you're gonna have to flavor your pasta. Everything else, sauce and stuff like that just sits on top. But if you wanna have a little bit of flavor in the pasta, we gotta season the water. So what I've got here is I've got 3 quarts of water, and I've got about a tablespoon of just plain old table salt. You don't need to worry about kosher salt or anything like that. Table salt or sea salt is just fine. So I'm going to go ahead and pour that in. Take my tongs and give it a little bit of a stir. Okay. Then what I've got here is a pound of lasagna noodles. It's just a package that you get from the store. And I'm going to go ahead and lay those in like so. Fan them out a little bit. Obviously my pot isn't tall enough for this, so what I'm going to do is take my tongs, and as they start to soften with the tongs and with my hands, I'm going to go ahead and push them down into the water. Okay? And also, at this point, I'm going to turn my stove down a little bit. Okay? So it was wide open, so I'm going to turn it down to a little less than medium. It's going to be enough to keep the water boiling, and we'll keep it from boiling over. And I'm also cooking my pasta about half to 2/3 as long as the box says. The box says 12 to 14 minutes. I'm really doing about 8 or so. And that's because I want the pasta to be flexible, but I want it to absorb some excess moisture from the sauce, because it'll take less time for the lasagna to bake overall once we have it in the oven. So we're going to finish this off. We're going to cool it, throw some oil on it so it doesn't stick together, clean our pot out, and we'll start making our sauce. All right, first thing we're gonna do for our red sauce is cook the meat off. So what I've got here is I've got a pound of hamburger and a pound of Italian sausage. So we're gonna go ahead and throw a little hand spray in the same pot we did our pasta in, but cleaned out. And we're gonna go ahead and push those in. And get in here with our spoon and start breaking them up. We don't want the meat super fine, but we want it, small enough it's going to integrate in with the sauce. So we're going to go ahead and cook this for about 6 or 7 minutes so everything's nice and brown through, and then we'll be back to add the rest of it. All right, so our meat is nice and browned off. We're going to go ahead and take a look underneath here as I push the meat to one side of the pan. We see all this liquid starting to come out here. Some of that's water. A lot of that is fat off the sausage and the hamburger. We don't necessarily want this, so before we add any more ingredients to this, I'm going to take this over to my sink, drain off the fat, and then be right back. Drain the fat out of the meat rather. And next we're going to add our tomato sauce. Now, you could make a scratch-made tomato sauce and do the whole 9 yards and everything like that, but we're going to take the more semi-homemade route here. And there's no shame in using decent jarred tomato sauces. So we've got a tomato-basil sauce here, 24-ounce jar. We're going to go ahead and add 1 whole jar. And we're going to add about half of a second one. And save the rest for spaghetti or something else later. And go ahead and stir this together. And take a look at what we're going on here. And I'm actually thinking we're going to add the rest of that jar. This is an awfully meaty sauce. So, yeah, let's go ahead and add the rest of that. All right, now that we got our tomato sauce in here, we want this to reduce a little bit, and we want it to kind of come together and cook. So to do that, we don't want to put a solid lid on because we want some moisture to evaporate out of here as it boils. But we also don't want our countertop covered in tomato sauce. So what we're going to do is we're going to use a splatter screen. This is a mesh screen on a ring that goes over the top of our pan. It's not going to stop all the red stuff from coming out, but it's going to stop most of it, and it's going to allow that steam to escape. So our sauce will reduce and come together really nice. So while that's doing that, we're going to talk white sauce. All right, Jessica's other favorite part about this lasagna is actually the white sauce layer. And what we do is cottage cheese as our white sauce layer that we tie together with some egg and seasoning. So in order to make it all nice and smooth, we're going to go ahead and put a pound of cottage cheese into our blender. Okay. Into that, we're going to crack 1 egg. That just helps it, bind when it's in the oven. Okay. And before we get going, we're going to add a couple shakes of nutmeg, which is a classic bechamel sauce ingredient, and a little bit of salt, and a little bit of pepper. And we're going to put the lid on our blender and spin her up. White sauce is done. We'll set this aside until we start assembling. We're going to check on our red sauce, and that is coming together nicely. Now from here, there's already quite a bit of basil in this sauce, so I don't think we need to add any more. What we are going to add though, to spike it up a little bit, is a little bit of garlic powder, a little bit of oregano, and a little bit of parsley. And again, use what you have on hand. If you have fresh herbs, awesome. If you have dried herbs, which are typically more commonly found in home kitchens, that's fine too. We're gonna go ahead and put that in, stir it up completely. We're gonna let this cook for another couple minutes to come together, then we're gonna taste it. And if we're happy with the overall seasoning, we may still add some salt and pepper after this. We'll see. Check our sauce out. Now it's had a chance to sit and do its thing. Pretty good. Add a little more salt, a little more garlic, and quite a bit more pepper. So we're gonna re-season it and we'll try again. All right, let's give her one more try. That'll do. So when you're seasoning stuff, I feel like, for instance, we start with this, then we're kind of adding things as go. Add a little bit at a time because it's very hard to take something out. You can always add more, but you can't take any out. And just kind of add a little bit at a time until it just tastes right to you. Salt is kind of an odd thing. It's not an herb, it's not a spice, it's a regarded as a seasoning because it's mineral. So it enhances the flavor of anything it touches up to the point where there's too much. So just add a little bit at a time until it's just perfect. Time to build. So we've got our seasoned pasta, our seasoned white sauce, and our seasoned red sauce. It's important to season every layer as you go when you're doing big complex casseroles like this, because you don't want a dull unseasoned spot, because you will notice it when you're eating it. So what I've got here for a pan is I've got a nice disposable lasagna pan is what it's called in the store. Basically it's a 13 by 9, but it's extra deep, so you can have super thick casseroles like this. To start, I'm going to go ahead and spray a little bit of pan spray. Okay. Then we're going to put a thin layer of red sauce on the bottom, just for a little added insurance. It doesn't have to be a thick layer, it just has to be there. Okay. Once we've done that, we're going to take our noodles, which we've cooked and cooled and oiled, and they didn't stick together too bad. And we're going to go ahead and put down the first layer. like so. Now at this point, next we're going to add a slightly more substantial layer of the red sauce. Again, not too much. Spread it around. Okay. Now we're going to add some cheese. So what we've got here is we've got shredded mozzarella from the store. No shame in buying pre-shredded cheese for this. We're going to go ahead and throw on a nice layer here. You want enough that it's going to cover up the red sauce, but you can still see it through in a few places. So about like that. Once we got that cheese down, we're going to go ahead and do our white sauce layer. So 3 more strips of lasagna noodles onto there. Then we're going to take all of our white sauce and we're going to pour it over top of our pan here. And I should have grabbed a rubber spatula, so I'm going to do that real quick. Get in here, drag out the rest of it. So this is the only white sauce layer we're going to do in the whole thing. We're going to get this on here and spread out. We're going to hit it with some more cheese, and then we're going to alternate noodles and red sauce layers until we get to the top of our pan. And for our top layer, we've got our noodles, and we're just going to hit that with a little more of our mozzarella. Then we're going to top that with some freshly grated parm. This is freshly grated because I still have a big brick of Parmesan cheese. If you wanted to buy pre-shredded of this, no problem there either. But buy fresh, don't buy the canned stuff. It's far better. Fresh is far better for this. So I'm going to wash my hands. We're going to get this wrapped and put it in the oven. Okay, wrap it up for the oven. We could just wrap it in aluminum foil, but cheese likes to stick to that. So we're going to give ourselves an added layer of insurance by using parchment paper underneath our aluminum foil. We're going to just stick that over the top like that. Then we're going to pull out our foil, lay it over top of the parchment, and then just crimp it over. Alright, so it's our oven set for 375. I've got our loaded lasagna pan sitting on top of the cookie sheet because these aluminum pans are awesome, but they're really flimsy when they're weighed down with stuff. So we're going to go ahead and slide her into our oven. Now, baking times will vary. Everything's hot, reasonably fresh like we got here, so probably 45 minutes to an hour we're going to check it. If it's coming out of the refrigerator and it's still cold, you're probably looking at 2 to 2.5 hours before you check it. We want the cheese bubbling, and we like the center to be about 165-ish degrees to ensure that everything is heated through. So we're going to set our timer for 45 minutes, and we'll check back then. So while we wait for it to bake, let's talk a little bit about what we just put together here. So lasagna, unlike its American cousin spaghetti and meatballs, is definitely a 100% Italian dish. It was eaten in ancient Rome. Cicero mentioned in his writings how much he enjoyed eating lasagna. The idea of getting flat sheets of dough likely originated from ancient Greece because the Greeks and the Romans exchanged a lot of stuff. So while we wait for it to bake, let's talk. Beyond that, the first modern reference of lasagna happened in 1282. It was in a book called the Bolognese Memorials, which is actually a collection of poetry, was mentioned in there, with the first published recipe appearing in the 14th century. And the fun part about that is they used a fermented dough in that lasagna. I'm not sure how that would have worked out, probably be very bready, but I'm sure it was good. And like everything that Rome did, as their empire expanded, so did their food. So everywhere the Romans went, they took their cuisine with them, and so you see mentions of lasagna all over Europe and into Asia. Everywhere they conquered, they took their food. And as we're going to see in a second, the fillings will vary. Within Italy, everything's regional, right? So we have Bologna, which is in the north, and we have Naples, which is in the south. So the Neapolitan style lasagna is a very tomato-heavy sauce to it. It actually has chunks of stewed meat in it that they use for their ragu, which is their tomato sauce. Lots of basil and a little bit of seasoning, but very basil heavy. They like putting mozzarella in ricotta cheese, which is actually made an offshoot of mozzarella from the leftovers. And also, I found fascinating, Neapolitan lasagna often has sausage in it, which we did here. They put little meatballs and they put hard-boiled eggs in there, which I think is very interesting. Bolognese lasagna. So an actual bolognese ragu is very thick. It has got lots of cooked down vegetables in it. It's got a lot of minced meat in it, dairy products in it, very little tomato actually, and no herbs at all, which is kind of interesting. In this country, we think of a bolognese sauce as a tomato sauce with meat in it, when in reality it's really a hybrid, because up here in the north you don't grow tomatoes all year like you can more so in the south, so they have to rely on other things for their sauce. So a American bolognese sauce like what you see in the store is really a Neapolitan tomato sauce with the meat in it, so it's a mixture of both. For their white sauce, they use a traditional bechamel up in Bologna. And for their cheese, they only use Parmesan Reggiano because it's what they have locally. And the neat thing about that, especially up in Bologna, is they'll often tint their pasta green by adding spinach to it. So for our lasagna, we kind of did a hybrid of both kinds. Did our own version, our own regional version, if you will. So what we did is we took a Naples-style tomato sauce, all tomato, but we added a large amount of very finely chopped or ground meat in this case to it. We took the Naples mozzarella and ricotta track for the white sauce and the cheese, because the cottage cheese is similar in texture to ricotta, and we put it in the blender to smooth it out. So it's got the spirit of the ricotta. So for our lasagna, for the cheese, we use mostly mozzarella, but we did top it with the Parmesan Reggiano just for a little extra flavor and a little extra salt on top. Okay, our oven timer is going off, so we're going to cancel that. We're going to take a look at what we got. I can hear it bubbling, so I have a good feeling we're pretty close to where we want to be. So let's just start with the visual. So grabbing the paper here, don't grab the pan, that's going to be hot. Grabbing the paper and the foil because it's not going to be that hot, okay? Even though it's been sitting in a 375 degree oven for the last 45 minutes, it's not that bad. So we're going to pop it open and take a look here, and looking good. Our cheese on top is almost melted, getting steam out of it. So I'm going to grab an instant read thermometer and I'm going to probe the middle of this, and we're going to see how much more we have to go. Be right back. Alright, we got our thermometer in here and it is reading about 149, 150 degrees in the center, as close to the center as we can estimate. So that's pretty good. We're not quite there yet. I like to get to 160, 165 or so. So what we're going to do is crimp this back on. We're going to go ahead and put it back in the oven for about another, we're going to go 10 minutes and see how it looks after that, because we are going to bake this with the covering off once it's up to temp inside. So 10 minutes, we'll see you soon. All right, here we go. All bubbling on the outside, a little bit of a tan on the cheesy layer. So this lasagna is done. But it's not time to cut into it yet, because we gotta let it sit and rest a little bit. If we got into this with a knife right now, everything would just go everywhere when we have soup. So let's let it rest, let's let it cool down a little bit, probably about 15-20 minutes or so, and then we'll cut into it and serve it up. Alright, it's been about 10 minutes, everything should have had a chance to settle, so we're gonna go ahead and attempt to cut out our first portion. So we're going to come through here with a sharp knife, cut out our little rectangle. The pasta on the edges might be a little on the chewy side, and personally that's my favorite part. I always like getting corner pieces. We're going to get under there, and out comes our piece onto our plate. There's that. And then we're going to serve our lasagna with a breadstick. Alright, as always, there is a recipe for our lasagna in the video description. I do hope you try it out at home. Please give a like to this video and a comment, let me know you're watching it. And do subscribe to my channel as well. Click the little bell next to the subscription notice so next time I post a video you'll get a notification of it. Thank you so much for watching. We'll see you next time.